Welcome to the More Perfect Union, the podcast that offers real debate without the hate. I'm Kevin Kelton, and this week I'm pleased to once again be joined by
DJ McGuire, founder of the neoconservative left, and I still don't know what that means, from Hampton Roads, Virginia.
Rebekah Chodoff, founder of really absolutely nothing, a feminist and writer from Kensington, Maryland.
And Greg Matusak, a common sense liberal who, I don't know about you guys, but this may be my last episode. I think I know what my next gig is going to be.
And that is?
Well, Ivanka's been looking for more help to watch the kids.
Yeah.
Because she can't make sure. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to watch the kids. What I'm going to do is I'm going to oversee the 6 nannies, the 4 security guards, the 3 chauffeurs, the 8 maids. I'm going to be that guy who does that for her because I think I could do that. So I can help Ivanka make it to court. I don't really want to be around her kids or be near her. I want to be somewhere in middle management
So basically what you want is the password to her Ring camera.
Yes, that's all I want.
And a salary.
Just so that I could ease her way to court. Yes.
Okay.
That was the most astonishing moment. Like both of her brothers and her father have school-age kids, and they didn't file for extensions or whatever. Like, I'm sure lawyers, the jury. No, there's no jury. Sorry, that's the no jury trial.
No.
Yeah, lawyers, bailiffs, all the other people who show up there every day have kids. And Ivanka was like, I'm sorry, it's an undue hardship.
Right, because they're a man, baby. They're a man.
So this week we have, we have so much to talk about. But once again, we have to lead with the Hamas war. I think that's the official name, or at least the working title that the Israelis are using. Everyone is discussing whether there should be a ceasefire, a humanitarian pause. And I think that there's a lot of people that are getting mixed up on what each one means. Does anybody want to weigh in first on this or anything else about the war?
I'm not even going to go first. I'm going to quote Hillary Clinton, who, as you know, was Secretary of State and has dealt with Hamas and has dealt with other hot zones like this. And her comment was, anybody who is asking for a ceasefire doesn't understand Hamas. And that she went on to say that Hamas would use that time to regroup, retrench, and launch more assaults. So that gave me pause and gave me something to think about, certainly.
I believe she said a ceasefire would be a gift to Hamas.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
And when most people think ceasefire, what they really mean is an armistice.
Yes.
Something like a more permanent end. Hamas has made very clear that that's not what they want. They have said they will do more October 7s, and they will keep doing October 7s until Israel disappears. I don't know which general actually said it, but in war, the enemy has a vote. And Hamas is making very clear with its vote, quote unquote, what it wants to do. And I would really appreciate it if Israel's critics would recognize that Hamas has made clear there will be no armistice, there will be no peace so long as they are in charge in Gaza.
I think it's worth noting that it's not like Hamas committed the atrocities on October 7th and then they've just been like huddled in a bunker. They've been continuing to launch rockets over the blockade into Israel. And while they do not have the same firepower as the Israeli army, and they have not caused the same number of casualties, they're not just sitting there.
I want to build on Rebekah's point because the term Iron Dome keeps getting used. And I think a lot of people think, well, Israel has the Iron Dome, so it doesn't matter how many rockets Hamas or Hezbollah or Islamic Jihad shoot at them because they have the Iron Dome, right? But what I think a lot of people don't realize is it's not an iron dome. It's porous. Missiles can get through. Rockets can get through. People can get killed. And Hamas and Hezbollah are getting more and more sophisticated in figuring out how to disable or confuse the so-called Iron Dome missile system so that they can sneak rockets through.
I'm going to use the phrase of Commander Spock from Star Trek, the original series: military secrets are the most fleeting. You can't assume that what worked today is going to work tomorrow. You can't assume that what worked yesterday is going to work today. Ukraine has Iron domes right now that they are using to try to defend their cities, and there's still some Russian missiles getting through. The Iron Dome certainly helps, but you're absolutely right. It is not a perfect screen over which everybody below is safe.
Right. So when people call for a ceasefire, again, I happen to think it's naive. Not everybody. There's a lot of politicians who are calling for a ceasefire. But I think a lot of people realize, look, Israel has a mission. They're out to get Hamas. How effectively they can do it, what is the best military strategy to do that? That's certainly over my head. I think it's over the heads of most people who are not military people. But this idea that the world can just say to Israel, well, you killed enough people, done, 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 game's over. You've killed enough. You don't get to kill anymore. That's not the way war works.
No, the U.S. killed 200,000 Iraqi civilians for a terrorist attack they didn't commit. This is asymmetrical warfare, what is happening. And I understand the outrage about the death of civilians. I certainly don't like that part. But what Israel is doing is not unprecedented. Nearly every nation has had a moment like this, and the criticism for Israel should be tempered by the knowledge that they are acting in a way that is highly precedented.
It's highly precedented, including World War II, when we were surprise attacked by a hostile nation. We declared war on them. So far, the parallels are the same as October 7th. Their allies immediately declared war on us. Again, the parallels are there. And we had to drop 2 atomic bombs to end that war.
On civilian areas.
They were civilian areas, but they were designated military targets because there were military outposts there, which is why Hiroshima and Nagasaki were chosen, right, DJ?
There were some important industrial facilities there as well, as I recall.
Right.
But the lesson that we have to learn, both from World War II and from the liberation of Iraq, is that the end matters as much as the means. We did not turn Japan into complete rubble after World War II, even with the 2 atomic bombs. We helped them rebuild. We helped them develop a democracy. They are now one of our closest allies, and there are more than a few Japanese politicians who are actually willing to stick their necks out and say, if they didn't hit us with an atomic bomb, the Soviets might have seized Hokkaido Island. With Iraq, yes, there was quite a lot of blood spilled in Iraq. But Iraq is a better place today than it was in 2003. I said it last week, and I'm saying it again this week. What the Israelis need to do, and what they need to keep an eye on, is making sure that Gaza is a better place when this is all over than it was when it all began. If Gaza is on the road to developing as an independent democratic city-state, most of the PR flack that they are getting, some of it's going to keep going because of Russian misinformation and all that other kind of stuff. But most people who will look and they'll go, okay, we really didn't want all of those people to die. But the ones who've survived in Gaza are better off. They have a shot at a better future, and that is good. Yes, the Bibi government is not the optimal vehicle for liberating Gaza, but Joseph Stalin wasn't the optimal vehicle for liberating Eastern Europe. He was the only one that was there.
Right. We need a plan to win the peace on behalf of Gazans. And listening to these recountings of different situations where we had to go to catastrophic levels of warfare to achieve an end is agonizing. It is agonizing. And the fact that we haven't learned from those examples. And, I talked about this last week, that we've had 15 years to deal with Hamas as a world, not just leaving it to Israel, leaving it to Egypt, deal with your shitty neighbor. And we didn't do it. And now we're here.
Agreed.
The foolhardiness of humanity sometimes is really disheartening.
I think the mistake that Israel made was Hamas was elected to be the governing body in Gaza. The Israelis didn't like that. But the Israelis looked at it and I think they made a calculation. They're better than Islamic Jihad. I think at some point they preferred the Palestinian Authority, and at some point maybe that shifted. That, quite frankly, is a little too nebulous for me to quite understand. But there was definitely a calculation. Let's pull out of Gaza. Let's pull out our settlements. Yes, we're going to keep a very strong border because we need that for our own self-defense. But they worked with Hamas to try to help them build up the culture there and the cities there. They allowed buckets of cash to go into Gaza from Qatar, and they were hoping it would go to the people. The Israelis didn't think it was going to Hamas to build more tunnels. I mean, they weren't naive. They knew that some of it was going to get siphoned off. DJ, I see you disagree with me, but I'll give you a chance.
Just because from what I've read from the Israeli press, and I haven't read a lot, the conventional wisdom there is that the Netanyahu government had a much darker reason for propping up Hamas and allowing them to be there. The idea was that they would use Hamas' strength as a way to completely remove credibility from the concept of a Palestinian state in the first place.
And yes, I did read a couple of opinion pieces to that effect. But don't you think that we should judge them on the actual acts instead of trying to read the minds of what their motives were? They were doing the things that you do to support the governing body there. They were increasing work visas. They went from 2,000 to 20,000. Yes, there were some military missions when there was violence, whether it was over the border or directed, at Israelis in Gaza. There were some military missions. Some of them probably ended in a way that wasn't fair to Palestinians. It just seems to me that the world is kicking Israel for doing the right things, which was let the Palestinians try to build their society, allow other countries to support them with humanitarian aid, stay the heck out of there for the most part. And it backfired against them. And now they're being blamed for that.
It's not a matter of Israel being blamed for that. This is an argument that is happening within Israel, where the opposition is accusing the government of this kind of thing. When a democracy is at war, the democracy is going to have arguments about that war, about how it's conducted. The democracy is also going to have arguments about how did we get here? Israel's political cycle moves faster than ours does. So they rocketed right through the rally around the flag phase and are now deep into the how in the F did this happen phase. And in that phase, you're going to get a lot of back and forth between the opposition and the government. We saw it in the aftermath of 9/11. There are questions about American readiness. There are questions about American policy. Those are not things that delegitimize Israel's attempt to defend itself and liberate Gaza. It is a matter of trying to figure out how to make sure this doesn't happen again, much like the investigations about how did Pearl Harbor happen. Nobody was going to say, oh, well, the American military screwed up, so we shouldn't go to war with Japan. Nobody thought that in 1941. And nobody should think in 2023 that because the Israeli government made some mistaken policies that they are therefore unable to defend themselves and ensure that something like October 7 never happens again.
Totally agree.
And let's also not forget that Hamas is a devious, duplicitous organization. We were talking about this in our group chat earlier today. As recently as August of this year, Hamas was holding conferences with outside humanitarian groups, pro-democracy groups, and the Palestinian Authority to talk about the possibility of holding local elections, which would be a precedent for national elections among Palestinians. They were acting like they were trying to move toward a unified Palestinian governing entity that could then go into negotiations in good faith about a two-state solution. Meanwhile, they were also planning this.
Right, exactly.
So, and they didn't deserve a chance. They were using negotiations, they were using pro-democracy actions as a shield for their ultimate plan, which was to eradicate Israel and all Jews in the world. These are not good people.
And let's not forget that they're still holding some 240 hostages and using them as bargaining chips, right, Greg?
The only request for prisoner exchange was they asked for 6,000 every Palestinian person in prison to be let free. They wanted everyone in every prison to be set free. And that's just not realistic.
But it's a beautiful thought. It's a beautiful thought.
Sure.
We're back talking about the Israeli-Hamas war, and DJ, you had a thought you wanted to share.
I think there is an older and forgotten reason why, frankly, nonsense in support of Hamas has gotten so much play and so much room to maneuver here. The three of you, I am sure, grew up in households where if international terrorism ever became a subject of discussion, it was always the terrorists are bad, the terrorists are evil, and the victims of terrorism must do everything they can to ensure it never happens again. I did not grow up in that household because I am an Irish American. And the 10% of Americans who are Irish American now, there's probably 12 or 13% back then in the 1970s and 1980s, we always said the same thing. Terrorism is bad, except in Northern Ireland. Terrorists are evil, except in Northern Ireland. Victims of terrorism should do everything they can, and we should all support them, except in Northern Ireland. And I don't think it's a surprise. I don't think it's an unexpected correlation that the worst examples of Hamas nonsense have been in New York City and the Boston metropolitan area, the two areas with the highest Irish American population in the country. Now, millennials and Gen Z students would have no idea what I'm talking about, but the professors who are egging them on in their 40s and 50s and 60s, they remember a bunch of white people who looked like me saying, well, you have to understand in Northern Ireland and Ulster, it's a blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That permission structure, which got to the point where a Massachusetts state Senate president could have a brother who was an IRA gun runner, and in Nassau County, a Republican IRA supporter got himself elected to Congress. That kind of thing left the door open, I'm afraid, for some of the nonsense that we are seeing today.
Well, on the flip side of that, and Kevin, you'll get the joke I'm about to make. When people are asking, why should Israel be allowed to do this? The question is, why is Israel not like all other countries?
Yes, I do.
And Israel's not like all other countries, y'all. As Kevin mentioned last week, there is nowhere else for Jews. Israel has the highest population of Jews in the world. The second highest is America, and after that is Canada, because Europe, for almost 2,000 years, was hostile to Jews. They were deported out of nearly everywhere they tried to settle. They were persecuted. They were disenfranchised. They were executed in some cases. And it took 2,000 years and a genocide for the world to agree that the Jews deserved a homeland. And we don't have another 2,000 years, and we won't survive another genocide. So in some ways, Israel has to fight harder and in different ways for the tiny scrap of land that they have been allotted.
And we also need to remember now the majority of Israeli Jews come from North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, from which they were expelled in the 1940s. So you literally have nearly half of Israeli Jews descendants of those who were expelled from Europe. And then the other half of Israeli Jews were those who were expelled from the Arab world. It is a country of refugees. It is, we call
Kevin,
ourselves a nation of immigrants.
Yeah,
Israel is much more a nation of that than we are, and it is because the people who come to Israel never had a choice to go anywhere else.
Right, and Kevin and I, we can both speak to this. I know I'm Jewish on my dad's side. Our grandparents or our great grandparents, they didn't come to America for the climate. They didn't move here for the amenities. Like most Jews have a pretty horrific backstory as to why we're American now, and we have not been a welcome people. The word diaspora has a meaning, and for those of us who are part of it, it's easy to excuse actions from Israel that are harder to excuse from another country. And I understand why they should be inexcusable, why Israel should get held to the same standards as other countries. But some small part of me is like, yeah, but if we didn't do that.
Okay, I'm going to build a little bit on that. I see a lot of posts, and I know I picked on younger people, but two posts that I saw this week were from younger people who, and they both started with, look, I'm not pro Hamas, and I'm not anti-Semitic. And then they used the word that I tell my kids never to use. And they said, but.
That's always the problem.
That's the problem, because my father used to say, if anyone ever uses the word but in the middle of a sentence, ignore everything that they said before that. You know,
Indeed.
so, like, hey, I love you, but you know what? Or I'm going to pay you this money, but well, you're not.
You don't look fat in those pants, but. So they would start these posts or these rants or depending on where I saw these online with, I'm not anti-Semitic, but, and then it would get really pretty anti-Semitic, and the level of comfort, words like Zionistic, you know, was thrown around like pretty fairly, and you know, like cabals, and I'm like, whoa, what happened to be not anti-Semitic? There was a lot of like, hey, Hamas is just, you know, pushing back and apologizing, and I was like, wait, what happened to Hamas being bad? Like you said, once again, the word but right in the middle of a sentence.
Now, I was going to say, I do think if Israel is to be accepted in the community of nations as it should be, then it should act under the same morals and under the same laws as nations do at war.
Sure.
But they're usually, again, it depends. It depends on the end game. If they are doing this to ensure that, among other things, Gaza is a better and safer place, then frankly, it's worth it. It should be worth it to these people, no matter what you think of Israel. I mean, there are very few people who are actually willing to do this. I know one person on Facebook, they put up a thing that said, "Free Palestine." I put a comment. I said, "From Hamas." And they liked it. That's the one person. I don't know anybody else who does that. But anti-Zionism comes in three ways. You're either pro-pogrom, you're either pro-ethnic cleansing, or you support the notion that Palestine should be a binational Jewish Arab state. You know the last power that wanted a binational Palestine? Great Britain. The binational nonsense is actually taking the literal position of the colonial power that these people say they hate. That's your three anti-Zionisms. I'll stick with Zionism. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to do something that I know Greg absolutely loves, and I don't do it enough, which is I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Oh, I hate it when you do this.
Okay, now I'm paying attention.
So I'm trying, when I'm in discussions, and I'm in a lot of discussions on Facebook. I was talking with DJ about this before we started. For some reason, my posts seem to generate really long, heated discussions about this issue. And people seem to get upset with me for having a strong opinion about it. But I'm trying not to second guess people's motives and their sincerity. And I've seen a lot of people who, frankly, agree with me on almost every other political issue who don't agree with me on this one. And they'll say, okay, Kevin, yes, Israel has the right to self-defense, but how many children have to die before it's enough? How many children is too much in terms of Israel's right to defend itself? So I'm now being that person, and I'm going to ask you, Greg Matusak, what's your answer to that question?
So it's not as simple as that. There is no number. The number should be 0. As soon as the first child dies, both sides should go, what the hell are we doing? So no, it doesn't work like that. There's nothing simple about this.
And that question, frankly, ignores the number of lives saved. I had arguments with people about this.
Okay, that's a better one. Go with his answer. Before the
war in Ukraine started, there are a lot of people saying, well, if we really support Ukraine, it'll just be an endless war and all these people die. And I'm like, yeah, and how many Ukrainians are going to die during the Russian occupation? We've already seen 3 mass graves in eastern Ukraine, and it's just been a year and a half. Do I like seeing Palestinian children die? Do I like seeing any Palestinians die? No, I don't. Do I think it is necessary to liberate Gaza and make those who survive be safer, be better, and have a better shot at life? Yes, I do. It's a high price to pay, but I do think it is one that should be paid for a safer Israel and a better Gaza.
First of all, Israel didn't start indiscriminately bombing Gaza for no reason. Hamas fighters bulldozed their way through barriers, invaded civilian communities, and kidnapped and killed people who were just going about their days. That's not typical warfare. That's something so atrocious. It's really beyond comprehension. It is as if guerrilla warriors came into your grocery store and just started kidnapping and killing people who were there shopping. You know, they also hit a few military sites, but mostly to give cover to the attacks on civilian sites. So how many Palestinian children need to die? That question makes me sick to my stomach because I can't condone harming civilians, but Hamas did that. And I don't know how else Israel can respond. If I could think of a different way for Israel to respond, I would get on a freaking plane to Tel Aviv and shake Benjamin Netanyahu and yell it in his ugly face, but I don't have the answers. So, Kevin, I want to hear what you were going to say about...
No, that's okay. I want to hear everybody's thoughts because actually you guys are helping me formulate my own because I've been asked that question several times this week. And initially, my response was, you're asking the wrong question. And then I would give very similar answers to what you guys said. But in listening to this, it's sort of like a light shined on me, or I got a little bulb over my head. And I realized it's not that it's the wrong question. People are asking it of the wrong side. The question is, Hamas, how many children have to die before you do the right thing and give up the hostages? How many children, Palestinian children, have to die before you come out of those caves and face up like men to what you did? So, Greg, you said the answer, it's infinite and it's zero, and I agree with you there. Rebekah, you made a point, and I'm going to reframe it. People are worried about the state of Palestinians, the dire living conditions of Palestinians. Palestinians are now dying by the hundreds every day, okay? What was the state of Palestine on October 6th? It was bad. Economically, they were struggling. I'm sure that there was some level of famine. There was some level of medical need that wasn't being met, but they were living in peace. What changed that? It wasn't Israel. And so people who are upset that Palestinian children are being bombed now, they have every right to be upset about that, but they're focusing their ire at the wrong side.
And Kevin, your questions about what was it like in Gaza on October 6th. It was bad.
Yes.
50% of the population of Gaza lives in poverty. Electricity is sporadic. People cannot get fuel for vehicles for their generators. They rely on solar power when that's available. Food aid is steady but limited. Medical aid is steady but limited. Financial aid from Qatar and other countries is steady but limited, and much of it is siphoned off by Hamas and not getting to citizens. If conditions within Gaza were bad, it is not because Israel prevented Hamas from distributing aid in the way it should have been. It is not Israel who prevented Hamas from rebuilding infrastructure when it was damaged in previous hostilities. It is not Israel's fault that Hamas is not building schools or water treatment plants. Hamas has been given the resources to do those things, and they have chosen not to. The conditions inside of Gaza are not the fault of Israel. They are not the fault of Egypt for putting up a barrier between themselves and a terrorist entity that kept throwing rockets in their faces. Everything that's going on within Gaza is the responsibility of the governing force, the de facto government of Gaza, and that is Hamas. So the conditions in that region are not anyone else's fault. And could we, the rest of the world, have changed it somewhere in the past 15 years? Maybe we could have, and we definitely should have if we could have. But you can't lay that at Israel's feet.
like Greg said last week, we sent over Jared Kushner. What else could the world ask of us?
Honestly, like if Slender Man can't get it done, what chance do the rest of these crazy kids have? Maybe that's why Ivanka needs extra help.
Nope. Among the many things that this has done that has upset and worried me is that it has made a lot of people take their eye off the ball on Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Good segue, DJ.
Thank you. We are the counteroffensive has largely ended. Russia tried their own counteroffensive that did not go well at all. And now there are questions about whether Washington will provide the help that it should to Ukraine so they can continue to fight and continue to reclaim territory. And that just we are looking at an imperial power seizing a chunk of its neighbor and hoping it just tires everybody out, or that they get distracted, or that Western governments put up friends of the Kremlin, like over in the Dacha of Representatives, so that they can call this a victory and then prepare again for the next invasion wave, because we know it's going to happen. I very much fear that people are not paying as much attention to Ukraine anymore as they should have. And it worries me
DJ,
greatly.
I saw a headline today, and I didn't read the whole article because I knew I was going to talk to you, and I could just ask you to explain it to me. Zelensky was saying something about gaining control of airspace. Like was he asking for airplanes or
Yes.
Or air assistance? What was that?
This is about the F-16s, which have been promised, but things keep getting in the way. I don't know what they are. They may actually be genuine logistics, or people in Washington have cold feet. Ukraine has done an amazing thing. They have managed to keep the airspace contested with practically no air force. But you cannot really do a counteroffensive very well if you don't have control of the airspace. And that's why they need the F-16s. That's why they need the ATACMs. They need to be able to control the airspace to move forward into the parts of the east that have been conquered, that have been seized, and into Crimea. I mean, they're actually winning the naval. They're winning the naval battle without a navy. And think about it. Russia has the only navy in the Black Sea, and they're losing the naval battle.
It seems like a no-brainer to send them airplanes. Like
Well,
that would be the first thing I'd send.
There has been a sale approved. I don't think those planes have gotten there yet. I think there was some question about training pilots. But the reason it didn't happen early on, and the reason that the Biden administration was against it, was they thought it was going to escalate the war. They thought that Russia said, if you add air power from NATO nations, it becomes a war against NATO. That's
Okay.
Russia basically threw out a lot of, we're going to nuke you if you do this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we now recognize that a lot of it is just Dmitry Medvedev getting too drunk.
Is Putin alive? Or are we sure we're not in the Weekend at Bernie's war?
That could be.
Just checking.
Despite that story that dropped, I think sometime this weekend, I'm pretty sure Vladimir Putin is actually still walking the earth, unfortunately.
By the way, while we were recording, I saw this come over my TV. I don't know whether you guys heard this yet or not. This is true. I'm not making a joke. Apparently, Zelensky has invited Trump to Ukraine.
Really?
Invited him?
Yes.
That is such a Zelensky move.
Yes, it is. It's actually, as I started to at first, I had a visceral anti-reaction because it's Trump. And then I thought, what a brilliant fucking move.
Will his plane get shot down over Ukraine?
No,
is that a thing?
He is never going to actually to that. But now every Democrat can remind us all that Donald Trump is a coward because he refused to go to Kyiv to meet Vladimir Zelensky, when just about every American official, including the president himself, found a way to do it.
Well, Trump was talking about going to Israel and then didn't go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But it's brilliant because if he goes, he's tacitly throwing support towards Zelensky, which is anti-Putin, which he'll never do. If he doesn't go,
he's clearly pro-Putin.
He's clearly pro-Putin. And for Zelensky, it's a win-win, because if Trump comes along, then the Republicans have to approve Ukraine funding, unless he goes there and says, yeah, I like this guy, but really this is a door problem.
We also have to remember Biden has already gone there. So this
Correct.
is something Biden's done that. Additionally, I just read a part of it. Zelensky has said, look, Trump has said that he could get peace within 24 hours because he's the master negotiator. But Zelensky said, I only need 24 minutes to explain to him why this is not possible.
So let's stay on the topic of Trump, because we always, all roads always lead back to Donald Trump.
Sure.
Today, I just learned earlier, is literally 1 year from the 2024 election. Everybody's hearing about the dire polls. Every time I turn on CNN or MSNBC or even Fox News, it's, things couldn't get any worse for Joe Biden. Wait a second, we spoke too soon. They just got worse. DJ, you and I haven't discussed the 2024 election yet. I'm curious, what's your take on how things are looking and how things are going to go?
Well, for starters, we are a year out. And I remember in 2011, Mitt Romney was ahead of Barack Obama. In 1995, Bob Dole was ahead of Bill Clinton. And in 1983, Ronald Reagan had an approval rating of 43%. And I think there were a couple of polls that had him losing to Mondale. I'm not certain on that. Don't quote me. But the point is, it's too early to look at these snapshots in time and say that's definitely what's going to happen. Now, Democrats have some work to do. They have to get Biden's record out there. They have to remind people what Trump's record is. Lots of news organizations have basically been ignoring Donald Trump. And frankly, I think that's helped Trump, because people don't see him as much. That's going to change in 2024 when he becomes the nominee. Cameras will have to focus on him. People will have to see how he himself has declined. I also think, and I'm largely alone on this, I've noticed that most of the polls that are out there very much undercount college graduates versus exit polls from 2020 and 2022. Now, they say they weigh for education, and okay, that's fine. But if they're weighing for education wrong, considering education is now one of the big dividers here, and there are more college graduates actually voting than what the pollsters think are voting, then that means Biden's figures are probably underrepresented. I'm not going to say it's enough to change the result of the election. I think there's some Democrats angry. There's some left-wing Democrats who are mad at him who are going to come home in 2024. And I think there are some folks who are some soft Trump voters who don't really remember who he was in 2020. They kind of remember the economy of 2019. But when they actually see Donald Trump at 24, they're going to go, oh, yeah, that's right. That guy from the COVID briefings. Holy F. So I think this is the kind of thing that we have always seen. And it's one of the things that I've also seen, and I can't remember who reported it, was that the Democratic coalition is harder to keep together in between elections. The Republican coalition is much more homogenous than the Democratic coalition. And so it is very hard for the Democratic coalition to keep everybody on side in a poll when there is no election to be held for most of the country. If you actually look at special elections in 2023, Democrats have been overperforming over and over and over again. And that's why I think Tuesday is going to be much more important than any of the polls you're seeing out there. If Governor Beshear gets reelected in Kentucky, if Brandon Presley can actually force a runoff in Mississippi, if the Democrats can flip the House of Delegates here in Virginia, then you have actual people who are actually voting, who may have told a pollster they didn't want to vote for Joe Biden, but when the time came and the rubber hit the road and they had to put a ballot in the machine, they voted Democratic because they knew they had to.
Yeah, and that's the Rachel Bitecofer idea of activated voters, that it's less about what the polling says and more about, what's happening in people's heads when they actually walk into the voting booth. But the other thing that I think we should talk about with polling And I don't have any good data to back up what I'm about to say, so maybe I'm wrong. But polling has changed since we were kids, when it was like one poll per presidential election, and they were, I think there was a standardization that made them reliable in their time. I think polling now has gone the way of the 24-hour news cycle, and there's a lack of substance. I think we are seeing polls that are like, what would you rather eat for breakfast, Donald Trump or cotton candy? And the questions are written in a way to generate not good data but good headlines, and I'm just really tempted to dismiss a lot of them, especially this far out. And the analysts will all say, especially closer in, that what you need to look at is not each individual poll, but the trends. And I don't think we're in a position for the trends to be meaningful yet. And I don't think we can get particularly concerned about individual polls today,
and that,
1 year out.
And that one pollster for much of the 20th century was the Gallup polling organization. They were the gold standard. Gallup stopped polling for presidential elections in 2012 after they got it so badly wrong. They threw up their hands and they said, okay, something about polling is whack. They didn't use the term whack. We don't know what it is, but we got it wrong. We got it badly wrong. We're not doing this again. So when the
I know what they got wrong. I was walking in front of their building around then, and I found condom wrappers out front. So I think they were busy getting laid instead of writing good polls.
Well, that may very well be, but there have been a number of polling snafus over the last 10 to 12 years, and I'm not saying that the polls in 2023 are necessarily wrong, although I have questions about them. But again, 12 years ago, Mitt Romney led Barack Obama. 28 years ago, Robert Dole led Bill Clinton. We know what happened in the elections since then.
Yeah. And I think that if anything, the past 4 years have shown us is that you simply cannot gauge from month to month what's going to happen.
Yeah.
At this time in 2019, none of us knew we were going to be on lockdown at this time in 2020.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
We didn't know Putin was going to invade
Trump
Ukraine.
Looked like a shoo-in for election. Yeah.
Sure.
For re-election. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I want to get upset about 2024, but we have major elections, like we were just saying, coming up on Tuesday, and we should be paying attention to those. And I think what you said about Governor Beshear and the Virginia House of Delegates is important. I'm less confident about Beshear than I am about Virginia. I think we will see, if not a complete flip, at least a narrowing of a red majority in Virginia. And I think the other one to look at, and this should actually be something Republicans are looking at and doing a little bit of soul searching, is issue 1 in Ohio. And Greg, I'm sure you have opinions about this, which is
and how? Yeah.
It's a measure to enshrine a right to reproductive choice in the Ohio Constitution. And the shenanigans that have happened around this are tremendous, but the bigger point is, every time this has gone to a ballot, the voters had shown up and been like, yes, we want the right to choose what we do. We may never get an abortion, but we would like the option, please. Thank you very much. And it's astonishing to me that, when we see these things put to direct democracy, there's a very clear result and a clear trend. And Republicans are still like, I'm sorry, the rights of the unborn overpower all of that.
Can I just make a quick data point for those who are not aware? Abortions in America have gone up since the Dobbs decision was decided.
They have
Really?
Increased. Yes, they have increased. There's been a different geographic dispersion. You've got some states that have zeroed out and states that border them. The numbers have gone up. But overall, abortions have increased in raw numbers.
Are we talking about surgical abortions or also medical abortions?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah,
overall elective termination of pregnancy.
So you can't say one without the other. And the reason that this bill is important in Ohio is because right now Ohio has almost a complete ban. It does have a complete ban on any
but that's
type
been
of
stayed,
abortion.
right?
It's been yes and no. It has been stayed, but at one point this past year we had a horrible instance where a 10-year-old girl got got raped and impregnated by an uncle. So it was incest, it was rape, and she had to leave the state to get an abortion performed. Her parents took her. I mean, it wasn't like
Greg, as horrible as that was, that was last year.
That was
because the Democrats used that in every single campaign ad in 2022.
This election year is how I see it.
Yeah, it was post Dobbs, pre today.
Post Dobbs, pre today. But
yes, it was post Dobbs. Agreed.
But at the same time, if there was a medical condition, also they would have to wait. The doctors are now telling women, "Oh, something happened. You're going to have to wait for this to come out. You have to be in pain. You have to wait 2 months or however." It's pretty bad. It's rather horrifying, these laws. So
I will say, I remember hearing for years from folks largely on the left who insisted that doctors did not really throw so much money at malpractice insurance. That was not really a big cost issue because doctors didn't really have to worry about that kind of thing. And yet here we are. We have the perfect example of a vague law that scares the hell out of doctors because they're worried they may get sued or imprisoned. And I think this is among the many other things there should be a lesson to do. We also need to take a look at this and say, okay, what else about laws involving the medical profession are so vague and so confusing that doctors feel like they have to shell God knows how much money on malpractice insurance because they don't know what the law actually means.
Well, yeah, there's that. There's also the fact that doctors are leaving states. There are people in medical school right now who are not even applying for residencies in certain states because practicing medicine is too risky and they can't provide the kind of care they want to provide. You are going to be seeing, particularly in obstetrics and gynecology, medical deserts where there are just no providers outside of major metropolitan areas.
Right. And in what sane universe, if I go to a doctor and ask, and for them to say, well, let me see the laws first before I can give you medical advice. That's ridiculous. Let me ask your congressman if I can prescribe these pills for you because,
well, and that's, because congressmen, when they write laws, they're not smart people.
No.
There was the one actually in Ohio, Greg, the one who was trying to write a law outlawing abortion and saying if there was an ectopic pregnancy, doctors were required to reimplant it in the uterus. And I got super psyched when I first saw that. I'm like, oh, I missed a memo. There's been a medical breakthrough. We can reimplant ectopic pregnancies. That's going to make so many people happy. No, that can't be done. That guy was making it up.
Yeah.
And that's a medical impossibility. And he was trying to codify it into law.
Yep.
I was actually really stoked thinking that could be done because that would be great because most people who have ectopic pregnancies wanted to be pregnant and they're sad that they have an ectopic pregnancy that isn't viable and won't result in a live birth. They would love to be able to reimplant it in their uterus and have the baby that they wanted to have in the first place. But no, that can't be done.
Right.
So in the general area of people infringing on other people's rights, claiming it's their right to infringe on other people's rights, Moms for Liberty is a subject that we have not yet discussed on this show.
Oh, let's go.
And I have a feeling that we have some strong opinions on it.
Let's get it on.
So
Greg and I had a phone conversation about Moms for Liberty, and I'm not sure how many times we use the F word combined, Greg. The swearing that we had to resort to in talking about Moms for Liberty. Greg, you go off first. I'm gonna listen.
First of all, I thought
was it MILFs for Liberty? Was that what you were talking about?
Yeah. I thought Rebekah
that's what they think they are.
I thought she was swearing so much I thought she was Scottish. I mean, oh my gosh. And she kept it relatively clean from what I've heard on video game chat rooms, but still it was rough. So the Moms for Liberty group is great. They're all for parental rights, but as long as you're the parents and you have rights, as long as your kid isn't black, isn't gay, likes books, likes to read, likes art, as long as none of those things are you're the parent of one of those kids, then you have rights. It's only their rights do they give two shits about. They're one of the most hateful groups. The Southern Poverty Law Center refers to them as a far-right extremist group. This is a mom's group. Okay, terrible people. Go on. I'm sorry, TJ.
I was going to say, in 2021, when Glenn Youngkin basically rode this thing into the governor's chair, the motto basically was 2021, teachers should listen to parents. 2023, not those parents.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, let's go back to the founding of Moms for Liberty. It was a couple of moms, both, I believe, from Florida. One was a former school board member. And I think at the time they founded this, they were no longer public school parents. I think they'd pulled their children out of public school or they'd graduated. But what they were finding was that schools were too woke for their liking. And so they wanted parents to have more transparency into what was being taught and more control over curriculum decisions. And these are not two moms who held a bake sale to make a banner. These were women with ties to the state Republican Party, conservative funders. They have been getting buckets of money and no one's entirely sure where. They're very well financed and they were already very well connected in state governments. And they've expanded. They have chapters all over the country. They have a chapter in my county.
They have a chapter in my county.
Yeah. And I live in one of the most liberal places known to man. And, we've got this group of them and they don't like me. We have a federal lawsuit about this and Moms for Liberty yapping about it. But basically, there's this idea that there are some books that are inappropriate. No, aren't even inappropriate. Parents should have the right to decide if books are appropriate or inappropriate. And schools have some sort of obligation to list every book that might be covered in the classroom, and parents should be allowed to opt out of those books. And this is what the federal lawsuit's about. The books with LGBTQ themes are teaching sexuality and teaching morality in a way that infringes on the First Amendment rights of parents to guide their children's religious upbringing, and therefore parents should be able to opt their kids out of certain books. And I got to tell you that that's a terrifying concept, because let's slippery slope this one. If parents have a broad right to opt their children out of curriculum they deem counter to their family's beliefs, how long does it take for parents to start acting as a block and opting 10%, 20% of a class out of a unit? And suddenly it's a FAPE issue. And a significant chunk of children are not getting the curriculum. And schools have to start changing the curriculum to make it acceptable to all of the students so that they're not being accused of denying students their due education. And we are writing curriculum not based on best educational practices or what knowledge and skills children need for the future, but what will be acceptable to the most conservative groups of parents in America. That will affect academic publishing. That will affect curriculum and testing materials. It will unmake education as we know it. And it is possible that the Supreme Court, which is very sympathetic to religious rights, if this case continues climbing all the way up, Amy Coney Barrett might say, no, absolutely. If this violates your religion, you should be able to pull your child out of the lesson. Any lesson in any school in America.
Relax, Rebecca. It's worse than you think.
Damn it, TJ.
Because
what's worse than that?
Because what you are talking about in Maryland, as bad as that may be, actually sounds moderate to what is happening in, say, Spotsylvania County, where I used to come from, where one woman has basically petitioned the school board over and over again not to allow their child to, well, actually, they don't have children in the public school system, not to allow parents to opt out of this, that, or the other, but to literally ban books from being in the school system at all. Mm-hmm. And it's not just here in Virginia. There are places all over the country that are doing that, where they're actually moving well beyond what the folks in Maryland are talking about doing, to the point where if any parent says they don't like a book or a piece of the curriculum, that gets wiped out for every student in every part of the school.
It's the Tommy Tupperville system of education.
Pretty much. Well, it's happening in Carroll County, one of the counties north of us. They have pulled 55 books from every school building in Carroll County, mostly at the behest of this woman named Kit Hart. Hi, Kit. Hi, Kit. You look pretty today. Is that what you want to hear? Do you want some attention, Kit?
So,
I hate her. I don't actually know Kit, but she's always on Twitter, like literally posting pictures of herself looking glam and then being like, yeah, I know you hate me, but I'm married. Haha. And she was recently
it's a pretty low bar.
It's a really low bar. And she recently posted a photo of like a rainbow painted pumpkin. And she's like, how these gender ideology people have to make everything about being trans. Like it's a pumpkin, Kit.
It's a pumpkin.
It's a pumpkin. Settle down.
All right. So let me, I'm not going to play devil's advocate because that's Kevin's shtick and I don't want to take it from him. But these morons for liberty, so they want like, they're conservative and they want like conservative values and traditional values. Why don't they try to be, I don't know, like fucking parents, you know, and like, hey, I see you with a book, child of mine. Give me that book. I don't like that. And just take it away from them. Like my dad used to do when I would find something that he didn't like, you know, he'd say like, oh, I don't like you reading, you know, liberal communist manifestos. Give me that book by Karl Marx. And he took it from me. And he didn't like have the school ban Karl Marx and stuff like that.
It was like the time my son was watching a YouTuber who had Ben Shapiro as a guest. And I was like, oh, well, he's not invited. We're not going to have Ben Shapiro in our living room. But here, let me introduce you to your new best friend, Trevor Noah.
Right. But they hate cancel culture, quote unquote, because although that doesn't really exist, but they hate the concept of cancel culture, but they don't mind this, you know, canceling this. And for goodness sake, if they want to be part of the curriculum game, run for school board. I mean,
well, that's what they're doing. And that's actually what terrifies me. I spent the summer of 2022 or spring and summer of 2022 opposing they weren't Moms for Liberty because there wasn't Moms for Liberty here yet, but they were similar. They were adjacent to Moms for Liberty running for school board here. And, you know, and I didn't even do anything overt. It was just a lot of social media posting like, hey, did you know this person has said this in past posts? This person believes this according to their old blog. And they did not get elected. And they blame me for it. And it's not me. They're the ones who suck. I just pointed it out. If they had sucked less, maybe they'd be on the school board today. So when you say to these Moms for Liberty, if you really want to change something, run for school board, they're trying. And if they gain control of your school board, that is very bad news, folks. Pay attention to down ballot races, even the nonpartisan ones. Find out everything you can about the people who want to sit on your school board and influence what is happening with your children every day.
We have a woman running for school board in my town, and she was part of the group that led the fight against the recent school levy, and she just shit talked and told us how bad the school was and blah blah blah. Kids don't deserve this money. People don't deserve. Teachers are the worst human beings. And then the next thing you know, she's like, I think I want to be on the school board because, you know, me and kids, you know, and I'm a diverse voice. I'm a white woman. I'm a diverse voice on this, you know, white people, you know, making America great again. And
one of our candidates that she lost her primary in 2022. Her video testimony at a school board meeting during COVID, where she was excoriating teachers and calling them lazy for, you know, preferring to teach over Zoom.
Yeah, of course.
During the height of a pandemic. That video clip was literally featured on The Daily Show in a montage of people saying terrible things about teachers. And then she had the nerve to run for school board. Like, and all we just kept doing is like, oh, look, here's Dawn. There's Dawn. That's what she thinks. Don't vote for her.
And one of the things that this has done, and we don't really talk about much, is it basically turned me into the last supporter of educational choice. They've moved well beyond that now. It used to be just that they would say, look, just let us teach our kids under our values. Don't give the public or the government run school system an advantage by going through tax dollars where we don't have it, that kind of thing. That's where the argument for tuition tax credits came from, for what are called vouchers, all that kind of stuff. That's all gone. That's all been burned away. They just
they get vouchers in Florida. You can buy a jet ski with them.
They just want complete control of the system. And they really don't care about all the things they said they care about. And I know, because I used to care about them, I still care about them, and now I'm by myself.
Right. They want complete control so they can burn it down.
So with that, boy, another great discussion. I'm really enjoying the fact that the four of us are back doing this. And we want to thank everybody for listening. If you enjoy what we do here, please follow us on Twitter at MPU Podcast and on Instagram at MPU Fan Club. And don't forget to share our link on your Facebook timeline and any other social media you may be on, TikTok, whatever it is that the kids are doing.
The hoop hop, the beep bop. I don't know.
Just mention the
We're
MPU
so
podcast
old, guys.
so your friends can discover us as well. We love your comments and messages and ratings on all of our platforms. So please show us some love wherever you can. Our email is mpupodcast@gmail.com. If you want to drop us a note directly, whether you liked us, whether you didn't, we'll validate your thoughts and tell you what we think about your thoughts.
And we'll tell you look pretty on the air.
Absolutely. And as we go out, I want to remind everybody that our theme song was written by the late, great Alan Keeney. And here it is. Greg Matusak, what's on your agenda this week, and what will you be eating when Donald Trump and then Ivanka Trump are on the witness stand?
Well, Ivanka gets the foie gras nachos because because it's high class. And actually, for Donald, I think I'm going to actually use my artistic skills and try to get in the courtroom and be that sketch artist. I'm finally going to use my degree. And to draw Donald is pretty easy. You just take the nacho cheese that I'm eating anyways, dip your thumb in and put a big thumbprint in. You got a big orange thumb. Donald Trump. That's a pro tip for you all.
Pardon me. Do you have any Grey Poupon?
Oh, Grey Poupon nachos. Oh, that's a better one.